North Alabama School for Organizers presents Fireside Chats, intersectional education through interviews with the organizations and people making real change right now. Listen, learn, and organize with NASO and Fireside Chats.
As I always say, if you want to reform the prison system, you better start with child protection in the schools, because that's where nobody gets into prison almost nobody who's had a stable family, has stayed out of the juvenile system, and has done really well in school. Those don't end up in prison. So you would think if you could solve those problems, we just get rid of the prison system.
Welcome to the North Alabama School for Organizers. We're very pleased that you're here. We have two special guests tonight. We have Diyawn Caldwell and we have Alan Mills. And Diyawn is a co-director of the Alabama Justice Initiative located in Birmingham. She's an advocate for the incarcerated in Alabama. Presently, she is fighting the building of 3 new prisons in Alabama. Now, she is also chapter president of TOPS, the Ordinary People Society. So welcome aboard. And we also have a gentleman that I've had the pleasure of knowing for some time, Alan Mills of Chicago. He's director of the Uptown People's Law Center, which was organized in the 70s, I believe, by residents who were attempting to get benefits for Black lung victims who migrated from the South. Presently, the UPLC is a full-service community law center. Attorney Mills has dedicated most of his adult life, fighting for the incarcerated. And welcome here. Welcome. And I'd like to just start off by asking a question of both of you, if I could. And I guess, Diyawn, first, what made you decide to get involved with the incarcerated?
Well, my husband is incarcerated. Well, he's currently incarcerated, has been incarcerated for the last 15 years. So that is a personal help the incarcerated, especially in the state of Alabama, due to my personal connection with my husband that is incarcerated.
Okay. And I take it, and also Alan, what really got you involved? I know you're an attorney.
Yeah, so there's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is that the people who founded the Uptown People's Law Center believe that people from Uptown went to prison and people in prison came back to the Uptown community. And just because they were temporarily housed somewhere else, that didn't stop them from being part of our community. And therefore, they've always been, just like we do housing cases and we do Black lung cases for people who are in Uptown. We did prison cases for people who were in prison who came from Uptown. So that's how we got started. And then since then, of course, it's expanded. Nobody else really in the state of Illinois was doing a lot of prison litigation. So we began, once you do one prison case, I'm sure as you can guess, you begin to get letters from everybody. So we currently get about 200 letters a week from prisoners all across the state of Illinois. We've now grown so that we have 7 class action cases pending against the Department of Corrections and about 20 individual cases.
Okay.
But I really the longer answer is I got first involved because my mom was involved back when I was a kid. So I really had that it's sort of a dream that I had, and I just happened to show up at the Uptown People's Law Center and discovered that they had this great philosophy that is already what I wanted to do. So I just fell into this job and never left.
Okay. Are you in the office now?
I am. I'm in. Yes.
Okay. And that is where the Young Patriots Health Center used to be. Right. Where we ran that health center back there. So you haven't really left that community very much.
Almost never. Yep. As I said, right. Built on what you built.
And also, Diyawn, could you explain to us a little bit about what the Alabama Justice Initiative is about?
The Alabama Justice Initiative is basically a organization that advocates for the currently and formerly incarcerated people, also for people to set people up for parole and do parole packets in order to help secure a successful parole for citizens of the state of Alabama. Due to the fact that there are no in-person hearings for the incarcerated in Alabama, we do have to set them up for success to go up against the parole board with the family members.
Okay. And do you have your own attorneys and
We
representing them?
We're working with, correct, yes.
Okay, good, good. Okay. Can you explain a little bit about the, I guess they're trying to build 3 new prisons there, and you're part of the fight there, correct?
Yes, they're trying to build 3 new mega prisons. The sightings that they're looking at are in Bibb County, Elmore County, and Escambia County. Right now, we are doing community outreach and organization, organizing with the Briarfield community, which is the Bibb County area, to stop the construction of the new prison sites. We have 2 people that have 2 organizations that have bidded on the construction. One being Core Civic. Of course, we know that's a private prison industry, and that's basically building off the backs of our people, profiting off the backs of our people. Because when you start going into the private prison industry, it no longer is about the rehabilitation and reform. It's all about money and filling beds.
Okay, yeah. About how many people are incarcerated in Alabama? Do you know?
Right now, it's around 26,000.
Okay. And each prison holds what, 6,000 or?
It all depends on the prison site. Holman, I think, has the capacity to hold 1,100. I think St. Clair has the capacity to hold around 11. It depends between 1,100 and 300. It all depends on the campsite. Some are smaller and some are larger. Your max camps have larger capacities.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Alan, in Illinois, about how many people are incarcerated there? Do you have those figures?
Yeah, it's currently about 35,000. About 7 years ago, we were up at about 49,000. So there's actually been some drop. A few thousand drops since the beginning of COVID-19 is temporary. We suspended all transfers in from the jails for most of the last 6 months. And of course, as long as you continue to release people, if you don't bring anybody new in, your population is going to drop. So that'll go back up again. But we did release a fair number of people, about 10%, desperately needed, because at that point we were the most overcrowded system in the entire country. And I want to say how interesting it is that we have the 2 of us on here, because Alabama, Illinois, and really that's it, are in hot competition for having the worst prison systems in the country, according to the experts that have worked in both of them. As they always say, when I go to Alabama and I tell people that it's a terrible prison system, everybody's sure it's the Deep South. Of course, it's a terrible system. And then I go around and say Illinois is just as bad, and they're like, "What the heck are you talking about? Illinois is a nice liberal blue state. How can you be that bad?" But it is. You know, all of our maximum security prisons, as Diana was just saying, they're big. They were really designed for like 1,000, and at one point they had almost 3,000 in them. They're down to about 1,500 each now.
Right.
But they're all really old. I mean, all of our maximum security prisons were built before 1920.
Right. I don't know if you all heard anything about the Department of Justice coming in and doing an investigation and filing suit against the state of Alabama for dilapidated prisons, the inhumane conditions, understaffing, and things of that nature that has not been resolved yet. And Judge is actually in the process of taking a ruling down on that because they have not met the criteria in which the Department of Justice has put out for them.
Okay, are they enforcing, Department of Justice, are they enforcing any of this, or is it just a Band-Aid effect that they have?
It's basically a Band-Aid effect. Right now, we're trying to reach out to Judge Thompson to get him to move further on the issue because basically the Department of Justice has put out these mandates and they're supposed to have met them already, and lawsuits should have been filed, but that has yet to happen. So basically, like you said, it's a Band-Aid effect, and they're kind of covering up things and not moving in a forward manner as they should.
Yeah, and we all know that Kay Ivey is not a friend of the incarcerated, or hardly anyone except for, the Republican Party. And now is it going to work like the construction's going to be done privately, and then is the state going to take it over, or are they going to lease it, or how is that going to work?
Well, this is the thing. Once they build these prisons, mega prisons, and they are leased out to the private corporations, this will be an $88 $88,000 a year. $1 million a year bill that the taxpayer is going to have to foot to pay for these prisons.
Okay.
Incarcerated is a private prison operator, so I assume they will build it and then also run it. Is that the plan?
Right, they will build it and run it, but of course, the taxpayer is paying that money back.
Oh yeah.
And the organizations that bid on the building, which is Core Civic, and another one is Al Bittram. I can't get his name right. I'm sorry, but they both donated to Kay Ivey's campaign and some of the other legislators. So
sure,
you know how that works.
Yeah, and I know you can get a parking ticket and be sent to prison. You can. It's almost like they randomly just pick people up and throw them in jail. Like we've been doing some work with the Etowah Visitation Project, in which we've been visiting ICE detainees in the Etowah County Jail. And it's just terrible, the conditions that's there. And I'm sure it is in these other prisons too. That they have all these people crowded into a single floor, and when we visited, we were finding out that some of them hadn't even had a change of clothes or socks or anything in a year, and do they allow you to come in and visit, or did they? Alan and Diane, did they allow you to come in and visit these incarcerated people?
From my point of view, yeah, because of one of our lawsuits, which is about mental health care, part of the settlement we got in that case is that we're allowed to visit not just in the visiting room, but go back to the cells themselves and tour any unit in the state of Illinois that houses anybody with a mental illness, which, as it turns out, is all of them. So we were doing roughly 2 tours a month, seeing probably 500 people a month face to face and at cell front. And then we usually do a 2-day tour. So the first day we would walk around the cells, and the second day we would identify people we want to have a more private conversation with and pull them out and have a one-on-one. And it wouldn't just be me. We'd have usually 3 or 4 people who did the tour, so we could see more people that way. All that has stopped since COVID. So we're not doing any tours or any visits at all. We have not set foot in a prison since March 13th.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say about mental illness. Cook County Jail, I know, is full of people, because,
Right.
when they dumped all the people who have mental illness into the streets, they have no other place to go, so they keep the jails full.
Yep.
Right.
You know,
And there's no programming or no type of rehabilitation for these people. Only thing they're doing is making the conditions of the prisons much more unsafe, putting mental health patients in with the general population of the prisoners. Because if you have someone that has a mental illness and they may have an episode or an outbreak or whatever you may call it, and the other prisoners may be frustrated or are having a bad day, those two together don't mesh. And that right there is a creation of violence waiting to happen.
yes.
Yeah, we've seen that all the time where a guard who doesn't like a prisoner will take somebody who's like a schizophrenic but not medicated and put them in the cell together, which is guaranteed to lead to somebody getting hurt.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, if you don't treat them, then there are going to be problems. Mental illness alone is not the problem. It's untreated mental illness that's the problem.
Definitely. And you can't take someone that's schizophrenic or bipolar and not treat them and just throw them into prison, because that's only compounding onto the issues that they already have. And again, that's a disaster waiting to happen. They closed all the mental hospitals. They don't have any type of programming or very little programming and rehabilitation for these people. And that's not even with health patients, that's with addicts too. They have cut out a lot of programming for addicts. They dump them into the prisons. They're overcrowding the prisons with people and issues that can be remedied on the street through rehabilitation and reform.
Right. If they just made mental health care and drug treatment as available on the outside as prison was available, then we wouldn't have nearly as many people in prison.
Absolutely.
There are long waiting lists for both of those things on the outside.
A lot of the population.
Right.
Now, how long do they transfer, and they used to, people from the Cook County Jail when they got too overcrowded to the prisons? Do they still do that?
No, right now, actually, the Cook County Jail is less crowded than the prison system is. Not by choice of the officials, but the Chicago Community Bond Fund has done an amazing job of both getting some people out because they raise money and pay people's bail to get them out of the jail, but even more importantly, doing advocacy. So there's now a court order, which is in theory anyway, says that a judge cannot set a bond which the person who's incarcerated can't afford to pay. So that has allowed lots of people to get bonded out on their own. And then they have reduced the jail population. The jail is almost half empty right now. It's not overcrowded like it used to be. They've closed down several divisions. They actually tore down the original Cook County Jail, Division 1. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So that's the answer to your overcrowding problems. And that's the answer as to why you don't need these county jails. You send people home. It's really easy.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. They say innocent until proven guilty, but it's definitely not that way here. They try to cover it up and shield it as if it is, but you're really guilty until proven innocent.
That's right. And that's been the advocacy here that this community-based organization has done a really good job of. And there's also, as with so many things in the corrections system, a racial bias involved. If you walk through county jail before and even now, actually the Cook County Board president tells a great story where she was touring the jail with some South African visiting officials, and they toured through the jail. They finished, they asked a bunch of questions to the operators, and then one of them turned to the Cook County Board president and said, "Okay, now when do we get to see the white people jail?"
Yeah. Yeah.
It is definitely racial disparities when it comes to sentencing and incarcerating. It is major in the state of Alabama and a lot of the other southern states.
Not just the South.
Yeah, well, you're right. You're right. Let me rephrase that. I apologize. My apologies. Um, I know to be fact that it is in Alabama. It's horrible. You know, they have. If you look at the parole board and the amount of people, white versus black, making parole, it's definitely. I think 90% of the blacks were denied, while 95% of the whites were um, granted parole.
Yeah, yeah,
So, and
yeah.
if you all don't know, our governor has been appointed over the parole board now. And well, she's appointed to govern the parole board, and she appointed Charlie Graddick, which is a former judge that created the Habitual Offender Act. So that's a basically, you know, you're resentencing these people again, and you also established the Victim Rights Association. So how is that going to be give anybody a fair chance at making parole?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And most people don't have the money, you know, for bail or anything like that too. Is that, Alan was saying that, maybe it's a little different in Illinois than it is in Alabama.
You just muted yourself. Hi.
Thing is, well, it says I'm on here. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Now you're on.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. What happens if you don't have the money, Diane, if you don't have the money for your bail, for instance? You're just going to stand there, right? And that's going to be the same as,
Right.
that's going to be the same as Illinois now.
Until you await your trial.
Yeah.
And basically they're warehousing people, for profit, because they're getting, they get money for each bed they fill in there. So they set the bonds at a rate to where they can't afford to pay them. I'm glad to hear in Illinois that they do have a bond program to where they can't set the bonds at an unaffordable rate, because they need some type of law established here in Alabama with that same those same infractions, because they are not allowing these guys to make bond here, knowing they can't afford it, and they're warehousing them until they go to trial, and that may be 1 or 2 years.
Right. To be clear, it's only Cook County. It's not all of Illinois. It's not a state law. It's just a policy of our court system here.
Okay.
People are trying to make it statewide, but at this point, it's just Cook County, which is a big deal because it's about a third of the prison population comes from Cook County for the whole state.
Yeah.
But it's not the whole state. Nobody should think it applies outside of Cook County.
Okay.
Yeah.
So don't tell all your friends that that's the rule elsewhere in Illinois. They'll be rudely surprised when they go in front of a judge.
Yeah. Who sets the price for it?
Well, I mean, the judge always sets the price. And that's why I said in theory, it's a court order, but that, like all court orders, it's up to judges to enforce them. And I can't say every judge has been completely compliant, but there's definitely been a lot more people who've been released on bond than there were before. So it's working.
Yeah.
It's working.
Fill out some sort of affidavit, income affidavit, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And your public defender presents that, and there's a negotiation generally about how much it should be.
Right. Right. Definitely.
No.
So what is the process on that? Because I know that they have to have a bond hearing within a certain amount of time. So are they quickly appointed a public defender if they can't afford their own attorney?
They're supposed to be, and also the sheriff has some social workers that help fill out those forms in advance before even they get to a lawyer.
Okay. Oh, wow. So you got social workers as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, our sheriff has at least as a public position, and there's always a difference in what they say and what they do, right? So, at least as a public position, our sheriff is very aware of the fact that there's lots of people in the jail who shouldn't be there, And I mean, just for example, the warden of the Cook County Jail, he appointed a psychologist for it because there's so many mentally ill people there. Rather than a security expert, he appointed a mental health expert. Says, you know, if I got to take care of all these mentally ill people, I should have somebody in charge who knows something about mental illness. Security is not my problem. Mental health is.
Right.
So there are lots of problems in Cook County Jail. I don't want to paint it as any kind of panacea because it's not. The Department of Justice, just like they sued Alabama, also sued Cook County Jail, which is part of the reason we have some of these changes. Is because the Department of Justice under Obama, not under Trump, which is a big difference, came in and forced them to do it in the jail. And that's, I suspect, a lot of what's happening in Alabama is, you know, Trump has
the thing about it is they're dropping the ball on the enforcement part with the Department of Justice. You know, they're saying and citing all these things, but they're not enforcing it to come about or to actually come to fruition. So now they're saying, okay, we have this report. This report is our leverage, but guess what? They're not enforcing the report.
right, and that's,
They're not.
The Trump Department of Justice hates these enforcement actions. So they're not doing them. They love the police. They hate the courts. So they're not pursuing these all over the country. And we have the same problem with our police. You know, in sort of the last days of the Obama administration, we had an almost consent decree against the Chicago Police Department, which has a long history of misconduct, going back to the murder of Fred Hampton and earlier in the 60s. Again, the Trump administration absolutely refused to follow through on it and has done nothing whatsoever about enforcing it. So it's been left to private individuals to pick up the ball on that. So yeah, no enforcement at all of that consent decree. Just like in Alabama, you have nothing going on. If you leave it up to the Department of Justice, it ain't gonna happen.
Right, definitely. But the thing about it is we have to find a way to get our family members more involved in what's going on to push these efforts, because without the family members uniting and coming together to push these efforts, they're just laughing at us. It's a joke, you know, because they feel like, oh, well, no one cares. We can go ahead and pass all these laws, you know, under their noses, and we'll do this and we'll do that. They don't know what's going on. And by the time people really figure out the impact that it has on them, it's too late. The law's already passed, signed, and governed. That's it.
Completely agree. Courts are all one thing, but if people aren't involved from the grassroots, it's not going to happen.
Definitely. We have to have more feet on the ground. And that's one of the battles that we're fighting here in Alabama as well, is getting those feet on the ground to actually, you know, come together and move in a forward progress.
And that's why I'm here tonight, because, you know, part of my job is not just going to court, but also telling the world as to what's going on in here, so that people can have the information they need to go out and get organized.
Right.
Appreciate that too. Are there any kind of citizen review boards in Chicago or in Alabama now to oversee, you know, the prison system?
No, we don't have an oversight committee. We are pushing for an oversight committee. I think that will make things much better, and will hold people to a higher standard and accountable for, you know, their jobs. However, we do not have that oversight committee, so that's why Kay Ivey is doing whatever the heck she wants to do.
Yeah. And she generally does, you know, so
similar. I mean, Illinois has a so-called advisory board, which is appointed by the governor, but it's purely advisory and nobody listens to it. So Department of Corrections has to explain what it's doing, but it doesn't have to listen to anything, and doesn't.
Yeah, I know.
Ability behind that.
Yeah. So, Alan, are you representing anyone now? Any cases?
As I said, we have 7 class actions. So we have one's about mental health care, medical care, and in fact, that's why I know something about Alabama, because the same psychologist who's doing the work in Alabama is also doing the work in Illinois. So we've been hearing lots about the 2 different states and how they compare for mental health care. We've got one on failure to accommodate deaf and hard of hearing prisoners, one on excessive use of force, one on parole, and one on trying to get people out for COVID-19. And I'm forgetting one. Too much solitary. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Definitely an issue. That there in itself causes mental mental illness. You know,
Absolutely.
you lock someone in a cell by themselves, basically 23 hours a day, you know.
Yeah.
No one comes out of that unharmed. No one.
Dark the entire day, then that right there causes psychosis in itself.
Right. I mean, I've now dealt with hundreds of people who have spent as long as 30 years in solitary, and not one
Yeah.
of them has survived without some damage
I
that
mean,
lasts after out.
let's be honest. How can you? Neither one of us can go in there and spend. I mean, I don't even think I could spend a day or two without pretty much losing it.
Yeah. 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 Well, how's the brutality within the prisons from the guards? I suppose that would be pretty high, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak for Illinois first, and then let Diane talk about Alabama, because I know nothing about Alabama. But it depends a lot on the prison. You know, at the maximum security prisons, it's a real problem, particularly as to mentally ill people. And you know, guards get frustrated dealing with people who are not medicated or not treated. You know, a severely mentally ill person who's not getting treated is, as we just talked about, difficult to deal with, whether you're a prisoner or a guard. And unfortunately, way too many guards don't have any sort of mental health training, and they just get frustrated, so they lash out and use force instead of treating it as a medical condition as they ought to. The minimum security prisons is not such a big deal, as is, I suspect, true in most prisons. The higher the security, the more abuse and outright beatings there are.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, there's no mental health facilities to speak of. You know, they've been closed down.
Right, on the outside. There were none in Illinois at all, basically in prison. Now there are, as a result of the lawsuit that's been now going on for 12 years. So as I always say, we're in these for the long run. Nobody should expect rapid change in the prison system.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's too bad because, you know, I mean, go ahead. Go ahead, Dave.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say how families are broken up and split up, and I know people that were in jail and weren't even allowed to, you know, the family weren't even allowed to visit, and especially now, you know, with COVID, that's a hard thing for anybody, you know, and with the ICE detainees, for instance, you can't even talk to them unless you're remotely talking to them. You know, you go into this room where there's a screen. You have to set up a time to talk to them. You have 20 minutes, and you know, 20 minutes the timer goes, and you're cut off. You know, and they're constantly monitored, and they're, you know, they're prisoners, and they don't get a chance to even sometimes call their family, and they don't have the money to call their family. So,
right.
We know we've had some funds set up to where we can give them some commissary money and phone, you know, money for their phones, but for the most part, they're completely crowded in there, you know, just about shoulder to shoulder, and the state, you know, they don't care. And when they're released, if they are released, and we've tried to get, you know, hearings for them, and one man was beaten and crippled, and they just threw him out on the street, you know, without any help at all, you know, just put him out,
Right.
And they were allowed to do that,
Right.
and they got mad at, you know, some organizations that went down and protested, so they cut out all the visitation, you know, from other organizations and people as a retaliation, you know. So these poor souls are left in there not ever knowing when they're going to get out, you know. Pretty bleak, real bleak.
Well, you know, this is the thing. Anytime there's any type of advocacy or protest going on for any issues, surrounding the prisons. They're going to do whatever they can do to cut the inmates off from the incarcerated off from the outside world, because they
Mhm.
don't want us on the outside to know exactly what's going on. So they
Right?
really want us in there from the beginning. And
Yeah.
once anything has been unveiled that they're doing incorrectly, they definitely try to cut us off then. Example, the brutality in the Alabama prison system is horrible. And they go and they cover up for one another, and you fudge paperwork to make it seem like it was a issue with the incarcerated person that caused the issue, when a lot of times it's the guards that are jumping on the inmates, beating them for no reason,
Right?
you know, using excessive force. It has been a lot of deaths because of that, and they try to cover it up, fudge the paperwork or whatever they need to do to make it seem as though the incarcerated person came onto them or was abusing or obstructing them, so that they can have a reason to say, hey, this is why we use this force. But in all actuality, that's not the truth, because you have inmates that come forward and say, hey, this is what happened. But of course, their word doesn't hold any leverage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go back to what Diane was saying about grassroots organizing. I mean, I think that an example that we've had two victories here in Illinois, which go to what Hy was just saying, which weren't lawsuits at all. They were just purely grassroots organizing. One is in terms of these video visits you were just talking about. Illinois actually passed a law after some really good organizing was going on, which said that you can have all the video visits you want, but you cannot use them as substitutes for in-person visits. So they can only be used to supplement in-person visits rather than displace them, as they've done in a lot of other places. The other thing that was really good in Illinois is we got the phone costs down. Illinois, before this campaign, had the highest phone rates in the entire country. We now have the lowest phone rates in the entire country. It's more like a penny a minute instead of 15 cents a minute. So it was and unfortunately, there's now a sort of unintended consequence for that, which is that they don't have enough phones. So we've had more fights about who gets to use the phone now in prison, because before many people couldn't afford to use it because their family couldn't pay the bill. But now it's dirt cheap, so everybody wants to use the phone. And they didn't, of course, put in more phones, thinking about this would be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think they really cared. Let's,
Yeah.
No, they were forced to do it. No question about it. People have to force them to do it. They don't care.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then again, those back to the grassroots with the loved ones and the family members and friends, because we have to have that backing in order to get anything started. Other than that, they're going to do exactly what it is they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I know one of the really effective tactics the grassroots folks used up here was collected thousands of phone bills from family members, so they could, and sent them and brought them in big stacks to the legislatures, saying, these are people from your district who have had to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars just to stay in touch with their loved ones inside prison. And most legislators had no idea that it was that expensive, or that there were anybody in their district who actually had people in prison. So collecting those phone bills, I thought, was a brilliant strategy.
No,
That
yeah.
was very, very, very.
Yeah. Well, we were in Alabama. It was the Etowah County Jail. The sheriff that was allowed to take the $750,000 or whatever left over from the food fund and bought his house down in Florida when those incarcerated down there, the prisoners were eating garbage, and some of the food actually had maggots in it, and they were really out of date. But the sheriff was allowed to take the money that's left over from the food fund at the end of the year. It was illegal, and he did. This was before the sheriff that's there now, and absconded with $700,000 and bought himself a home. And that created such an uproar that it finally got changed to where there's a citizens review board now to review what's going on there in the Etowah County Jail and make sure that they're appropriating it.
Oh, looks like we lost Diane.
Yep. Oh.
Hopefully she'll come back again.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, it never ceases to amaze me how creative people can be at figuring out how to torture prisoners. It just never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah.
Oh, there she's back. We missed you.
You there? But yeah, it's totally insane that they were allowed to do that, and but they were allowed to do that, and it was legal.
Yeah.
You know, they're pretty much allowed to do whatever they want, but you know, it's getting. We have a few minutes left here, and I wanted to know who else we have. Oh, we have one other person on here.
And he said he had to step away to talk to check out his dog. I don't know if he's back. I don't know if Llewellyn, are you back again?
Oh, well, okay.
He left a message.
I would
He's
like.
back. He's back with his dog. Okay. Your dog okay?
You there? Llewellyn?
He's muted.
Okay.
I'm here. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm good. Bottom line, I'm good.
Did you have any questions?
I did. Do I have time for a question?
Oh, yeah.
Floor is yours.
Okay, I'm working in the community. In addition, I'm doing some research on the connection between education and the prison system. And it's based on an article that I thought at one time was like an urban myth, but it's an actual article about how governments decide to build prisons based on fourth grade standardized testing. And I'm wondering, that's a long introduction, but I'm just wondering if your work, either of you, Diane or Alan, if your work does make some connection between those two.
I do have some people that we work with that do the school to prison pipeline work. So yes, I'm kind of versed in what's going on with that literacy testing and how they use that to build the prisons going forward. They really need to have some sort of oversight in that, because I believe a lot of that comes within the school system, and that can be corrected before these kids graduate, so that we don't have the percentage of children that they have projected that to actually go to prison.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't do work in that space directly, but I can say two things about it. One is that we have done some real work in terms of the literacy level of people who are in prison. And I know that in Illinois, the most recent figures I've shown is that about a third of the prisoners are functionally illiterate, and that the average reading level is less than an 8th grade level. And we've done this in the context of trying to persuade the parole board that they have to appoint lawyers for people. And it's unrealistic to ask for people to represent themselves. But I think it shows a lot about just how people end up in the system. The other thing is there's a new book which comes out of some hard work on the ground, Prison by Any Other Name, written by Vicki Lawrence and Maya Shenwar. And what it looks at is all of the sort of incarceral things that we don't think of as prisons. And one of its main chapters is about schools and how the idea of punishment and locking people up and the public safety officers, as they now, the so-called public safety officers, which are really just police in the schools, really start that prison pipeline from very early on, beginning to deal with behavioral problems as criminal matters rather than as a problem with the school. So, and they talk about like the child protection agencies, how foster homes often become a pipeline into prison as well. And I forget all the other chapters, but mental health treatment we were talking about. How you can It's one thing to make mental health care available in the community, but it's a whole other thing to put people into it mandatorily, to force them into it punitively. So that's another pipeline that is supposed to be a way to avoid people going to prison, but in fact ends up sending more people to prison. And electronic monitoring is the other thing they focus on. So I think there's a growing body of literature out there about how not just school to prison pipeline, but all these things that we don't think of as prisons are really should be viewed as part of the overall carceral state that we have. As I always say, if you want to reform the prison system, you better start with child protection in the schools, because that's where nobody gets into prison almost nobody who's had a stable family, has stayed out of the juvenile system, and has done really well in school. Those don't end up in prison. So you would think if you could solve those problems, we just get rid of the prison system.
Definitely. And we also have to think in that aspect, you made a good point about stable families, but when we're taking most of the fathers out of the homes, then, you know, that right there breaks the dynamics of the family down. And a lot of the men, the boy children have to step up into that man role in an early age. And that in itself, in essence, becomes an issue and a problem that may drive them to prison eventually.
Yep. Heather Thompson, who wrote the recent book on Attica, wrote an article on for the Atlantic magazine, I want to say 10 years ago. It was right after Ferguson, actually, right after Ferguson. So wherever that was. I'm losing track of time. Talking about how our prison system is now so large that it actually makes our communities less safe because of exactly what Diane just said. We've ripped away so many people from those communities. What really keeps a community safe is strong bonds between people in that community. And when you take and it's, you know, it's not like our prison system is evenly spread. It's concentrated in very small areas of our communities. And you've just destroyed the social bonds in those communities, just like Diane just explained. So it's happening at the grassroots and it's happening in academia, that sort of analysis.
Okay.
That's probably more than you wanted to know, but.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm just getting into this, so everything I can get, I'll take. Thank you.
I can talk a long time about ways into prison. It's disgusting.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can talk forever about the prison system. It's very horrible and deplorable, you know. And they say it's the Department of Corrections, and in essence, it's the Department of Warehousing, because there is no corrections or rehabilitation that is effectively put in place for the incarcerated ones in order for them to come out and reacclimate into society properly. And a lot of it has to do with the jobs of the classification officers starting off, because there should be a plan from the day they come in to their exit time, or up to parole, in order for them to achieve their goals and have a map laid out to what they need to achieve in order to come back and reacclimate into society.
And then they have to provide the resources
And
so you can do those things.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely the resources. And taking away the classrooms and putting more bunks in there to house people, because that's all they're doing. And they say, oh, we don't have space for programming. Of course you don't, because you're incarcerating people at a higher level than you are rehabilitating them.
Yep.
Okay. Well, certainly appreciate you folks coming on. You know, good to see you again, Alan, and it's very nice to meet you, Diane. And I hope we can do some work together, you know, in the future.
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts? Anything?
I would just say, you know, to anyone that would watch or listen to this thread, just get involved. Get involved. You have to get involved in order to make any kind of change. We can't just hope and think and pray that it's going to change, but we actually have to put the work forward in order to make these changes. We have to hold these legislators and these constituents accountable for what it is they say that they're going to do. You can't just get in my office and allow them to sit there and not hold them accountable for what they campaign.
Yeah, because they're the real criminals.
Definitely. So my point to that matter is that we definitely need to get educated and get involved in what's going on and make them push
Right.
forward progressively as to, per their campaign and per what they said that they're going to do. We need to hold them to it and hold them accountable.
Yes. We'd
So-
certainly like to have you all back again.
If I got,
You know, I think this is a very good program here.
give me 1
And,
minute for my closing here. I got two things I want to say.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. First, I just want to say, to Diane's point, I completely agree with everything you said. All I would add is, don't wait around for a perfect thing to get involved in. Just do something, whatever it is, do something. Don't wait for the perfect opportunity to come along and say, oh, that's not good enough, I'll wait for something else. Just do it.
Yeah.
What Hi and I were talking about before. You're young, you don't know what you're doing. Just do it. Who cares? Maybe you can't do it. Maybe you can. Maybe everything that somebody else says is impossible will actually be possible. The only other thing I want to say is if you want to know more about the Uptown People's Law Center, we have a website, uplcchicago.org.
Okay. All right.
Check us out. Lots of
One other thing,
information there about our work.
Sidebar, if you don't mind me getting your information from Hi, I have a couple things off the record I would like to speak with you about.
Absolutely. I think you've sent us both an email, but Hi, why don't you send us both an email so we can introduce us to each other, make sure we have each other's.
Okay, I will.
Great.
Great. Wow. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And,
Thank you.
Thank
My
you
pleasure.
thank you for hosting, and thank you, Tom, for recording.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Educate to organize.
That's what we're all
Okay.
about.
And we'll see you guys.
All right, have a great night, everybody.
Fireside Chats is a production of North Alabama School for Organizers. NASO seeks to empower communities through intersectional education and training. More information, including upcoming classes, at naso.network. Thank you for joining us for Fireside Chats.